What I would like to say to start us off is, first of all, it's very clear that this is a topic which is very, very important to a lot of teachers. I mean, looking at how many people we have in the audience, it clearly strikes a chord with a lot of people in many different parts of the world. The From my experience of working with teachers and with, for example, language schools, I know that a lot of teachers are actually doing a lot of activities which could be called regulating emotions, but sometimes they're just not aware of it. So the fact that you're not aware that something like regulating emotions exists and that it's important doesn't really mean that you're not doing it. What is really, really important to say right at the beginning is that the more tools teachers have to help their students regulate their emotions, um, the better it is for the teachers themselves and for the students. And here is where the role of the institutions is so big, because I really strongly believe that if we assume, as I do, that regulating emotions is such an important topic, then it really should be included in the CPD program in an institution. And really, it should be included in teacher training. So when people are trained to become teachers of whatever subject, but obviously here we are talking about teaching English. So that topic should be included in teacher training. What I would like to ask Anna and Neil, so how does that work or doesn't work in your context? Anna, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It really was
Thank you.
emotionally uplifting.
Thank you.
Uh, um, yeah, so I am a teacher trainer. I work with teachers in my own business and also as a CELTA trainer. And I think this is such an important, such a big topic to cover that doesn't really get talked about much. Um, Teachers are this is a caring profession, same as nurses or doctors. Nurses or therapists. Therapists and nurses, they are taught how to deal with their own emotions so they can be there for their clients or patients. And teachers aren't. And I'm constantly shocked at the fact that we're just not taught how to handle other people's emotions. And that actually handling other people's emotions means learning how to handle our own emotions first. Um, so I think this is a big, big, big topic that we should all talk about as much as possible, loudly, and just share tools and resources and um, in this community of people that is becoming aware of the importance. Um, so yeah, that's just to start with.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Neil?
I think it's testament to the importance of the topic that we have so much vibrant chat taking place.
Yeah.
This is something that teachers increasingly are aware of, both in terms of looking after their own well-being, but also the responsibility that we perhaps share for our students. Picking up on some of the comments, Sylvia asking about how do we help learners with special educational needs. Helen asking about taking into account individual differences. I mean, to go back to your question, like you, like Anna, I'm a teacher as well as a teacher trainer. In my role as a teacher trainer on CELTA programs, do we run sessions on this? No, we don't, but I think we should. But what I do hope is that we embody it in terms of the way that we deal with feedback. You know, that crushing moment, and I'm sure we've all been there at some point in our careers where we've had someone come in and observed the lesson and they've told us it wasn't good enough. Now, the good trainer will, I think, do two things. They will be equipped with skills to break that news compassionately, but also they will equip the trainee teacher to pick themselves up and to overcome the emotional hit of being judged to be not yet competent. So I actually think teachers, many of them, not all of them, are actually instinctively really quite good at this. Um, I think COVID was very interesting. I think there was a turn just after COVID where teacher well-being was very much on the agenda. And we were seeing books published by Sarah Mercer and the like. I mean, her title, Teacher Well-being, published by OUP. What I also think is we're seeing a turn, perhaps in the last year and a half, towards greater interest in social emotional learning that was also mentioned in chat by Sylvia, where there is an increase of interest in activities that teachers, without training, unlike those nurses and therapists that you mentioned, Anna, to help students to actually be aware of, to manage, and therefore to ask Kishwa's question about what do we mean by regulation. For me, regulation is about the individual having the control of their emotions and the ability to not ignore them, as you say, but to work with them and to manage them, to regulate them, to turn them up or to turn them down, rather than be overwhelmed by them. So I think it is happening. I mean, I deal a lot with one-to-one students in exam situations. I teach doctors, and they are potentially at the, if they pass or they fail their English language test, they may or may not be able to move to the UK, to America, to Australia to work. It's massive for them. That causes huge stress. So I try both in my lessons to enable the learner to see their progress, but also to have sessions with them to make sure that on exam day, they are equipped to self-regulate. Do they know what to expect? Do they know what to do when the unexpected happens? Because it often does. Do they know to leave on a bus a couple of buses earlier than they might normally do in case there is traffic on the way there? So I think there are lots of simple steps that we do as teachers. But yes, I think, as Anna has hinted, its absence from teacher training courses is problematic. I wonder what we can do about it. Is it CPD within schools, or should it be actively on the curriculum or on the syllabus of a teacher training program? Anna, what do you think?
I think, I mean, obviously, you know, in order to be able to influence decisions about the curriculum of teacher training courses at university, for example, or teacher training college, that would take a little bit of lobbying, probably. But my hope is that because there is more and more and more talk about it, at one point, it will become clear for those responsible for creating those syllabuses or curricula and for revising them that this is something that needs to be addressed. Interestingly enough, when I was a student, there was an attempt to address that issue. And, you know, I was a student a very long time ago. But it was an attempt at a very theoretical level. So we actually had classes in psychology of learning, and that dealt with emotional stuff a little bit, you know. So I said that there was an attempt, but it wasn't very practical. I mean, you know, we could talk about theories for a long time, but not really about practical applications. And I can see nods from other people on the panel. So I think what we realistically what we can do is include it in the CPD programs. And you know, if you're not a decision maker in an institution, then you know, ask for it, because you are doing it in the classroom. And so it's not that it's something new that's going to be introduced, but because you are already doing it, what you need is more confidence, more skill, a wider range of knowledge and skill so that you can make better decisions about what to do in a given situation. You know, when I look at my own development and the knowledge that I have gained over the years, you know, when somebody asks me a question, I can answer straight away because I have the knowledge and I have the tools and I have the skills. Whereas probably, you know, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, if somebody asked me a question, I would probably come up with some answer, but it wouldn't be so automatic and it wouldn't be perhaps so structured. And so for me, doing certain things in the classroom has kind of become, and it doesn't matter whether it's a language classroom or a training room, it has become kind of automatic. And that's why I think that we need to work on widening the range of skills that teachers have at their disposal, so that they can be more effective when working with students, and that they can be more systematic in this work. Because one of the things which is kind of missing, in my opinion, is that there are not a lot of teachers who help students in regulating their emotions in a systematic way. We do it, you know, through different types of activities, because we all know that emotions are actually really, really important in learning. So we all know this, yeah. So we try to do it, but we don't help students to regulate their emotions or to learn to regulate their emotions in a more systematic way. And that's why, you know, the presentation actually showed a couple of very practical activities which you can use. There was an interesting question, if I may continue for another couple of minutes. There was an interesting question from, I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was, I think it was from Helen, yes, about individual differences in how learners respond to different activities. That's an extremely important point. And thank you very much, Helen, for raising this point. You know, one of the things that we need to always remember is that although some emotions are expressed in similar ways by different people, in fact, when you look closely, every single person expresses emotions in a different way because they experience emotions in a different way. And that's why, you know, when we go back to one of those activities that I presented, which was the emotions meter, the importance of that step when students explain why they feel that an emotion belongs in this quadrant or in this quadrant, because, you know, the same emotion could belong in 2 or even 3 or 4 different quadrants for a number of people. And it's really important to respect that and not to try to make them or to force them to feel something different from what they feel, and also not to make them react in a different way than they naturally do. I think that's an extremely important point. So the individual differences are, you know, they are the foundation of working with emotions in the classroom, not only in the classroom, in the training room as well. Yes, Neil, sorry.
Come in there to link what you've just said to one of the other questions, I think from Sylvia, where she's referring to a learner with a special educational need, perhaps anxiety or ADD, ADHD. I mean, the common model now is for integration. And I think what's really interesting, this is what triggered it, when you were talking about students recognizing that a similar or the same emotion may be experienced in very different ways, where that becomes explicit, it helps to build compassion.
Absolutely.
And compassion builds rapport.
Yeah.
And that integration of learners with all types of special educational needs and the visibility that comes from it also engenders that sense of integration and compassionate rapport.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you any tips for Sylvia in terms of how to deal with a learner with whatever special educational need. Are there any guidelines that you, or indeed Anna, you can share with all of us to
Mm.
to to really help that learner, and for that learner to feel valued, recognized, and empowered?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the most important things is always, no matter what the situation, is to listen and to respect what's happening with the learner. The students with special educational needs very often respond to stimuli in a slightly different way to the average student. Now we know that average is not a good concept, because there is nothing like an average, yeah. But okay, you know what I mean. And so it's important for the teacher to observe and sometimes to guide the student. Okay, so by, for example, asking questions. Okay, so this is how you're behaving at the moment. So which of the 4 zones are you in now? Are you in the red zone? Are you in the yellow zone? Are you in the green zone? Or are you in the blue zone? And that actually helps those students with special educational needs to express. It's the first step to recognizing their emotions and expressing them. And that also gives information not only to the teacher, but also to the rest of the class. And it's information on a number of different levels, because it also teaches all the other students that every single person, no matter what their needs are, has the right to teachers' attention, you know, and that's an extremely powerful lesson. Now, I know that when we are talking about mainstream education, that obviously is problematic, especially where classes are very big. If you have a class of 30 people or 40 people, that can be a little more complicated. But in the language school context, for example, or in the training context, you can definitely go in that direction. One more thing, something from my own experience from a relatively recent training session. I was working with university teachers, and we were doing a lot of practical activities. And so, because it was a very, very large group, there was obviously a lot of noise in the room where we were. And one of the teachers came up to me and she said, "I'm sorry, but I'm on the spectrum, and this noise is really disturbing for me, and I would like to leave the room for a couple of minutes." And I said, "Absolutely. I mean, at any point that you feel that it's too much for you, just leave. You don't have to ask, just go." Okay. And then when she came back, she was actually wearing headphones until the end of the session, because the headphones allowed her to participate in the session but muted the noise. Yeah. So she was actually quite aware in terms of what it was that she needed. But I, as a trainer, needed to understand that and to accept that and, go along with that. Anna, I think you wanted to say something.
Oh, I'm just agreeing with you. Yeah,
Okay,
I
right.
think, one of the things, the best thing we can do for Sen students is just give them the space to take care of
Yeah,
themselves.
yeah,
Um, Kids and adults, they're not always in a place where they want to share or can share how they feel. And I think for teachers and trainers, the main thing is to figure out how to be patient, and how to be accepting. I can imagine many teachers stressed out after, or trainers after many lessons, many input sessions, not really responding well to a trainee coming in with um, headphones,
yeah.
or a teacher after a long day won't
Hmm.
respond well to a kid who's gone to the bathroom 3 times
Hmm.
already. So it's very easy to say, no, sit down, do the work,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
Um, but that child probably really needs the break.
Yeah.
So I think it all starts with the teachers and trainers, and teaching teachers and trainers how to self-regulate, so that we can then bring that into the classroom and also te teach it by modeling it.
Do you not think also, though, sometimes it's about trainers having the humility to accept that the learner is very likely, particularly as they get older, to have the solution already, and that
Yes.
and that it's our job to listen and to ask. I mean, I remember a case in point of a learner that I had, incredibly high achieving. I mean, this was a man who was doing an MBA and an MSc at two Ivy League universities simultaneously.
Oh,
Got to
wow.
both. I mean, this guy was amazing. And I had the rather invidious situation of preparing him for the GMAT exam, the MBA entrance exam.
Yeah.
And it was a one-to-one lesson. And it was the first week that I was working with him, and second or third lesson, he was just looking out of the window and looked bored, rigid. And it goes back to your point of Anna of, feeling a bit affronted by this. It's like, but really hard to try and make these lessons meaningful. And I just thought I'm going to have to ask him. But rather than asking the question which I should have asked is, how are you feeling? How's this for you? I assumed that he was unhappy and I said, is everything all right? I mean, would you prefer another trainer? He said, no, I love what you're doing. It's just that I concentrate by looking out into the distance. I was like, oh, right. Okay. So that means you're taking it in. And I thought it was switched off. The exact opposite. So that willingness to learn from the learner rather than assume that because we are the teacher, or perhaps even worse, the trainer, and therefore we have the answers, is something that we should be very mindful of. And yes, we have experience, but not always the right experience.
And
Yeah.
also, I think here that I think we as trainers and teachers, we feel that we have to have control. Our students expect it of us. We must know. We must have control, or else bad things will happen.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
very vague, undefined, right? All to do with emotional regulation. Um, and this can be taught. We can learn how to let go, how to listen to our students, and be there with them and give them what they need.
Yeah. Yeah,
I,
yeah, it's a very important point. Can I just say one thing? The we all talking. We all say a lot about learner-centered teaching, and listening to students and giving them space in our lessons or training sessions. That's the very definition of learner-centered teaching. Sorry, Neil, you wanted to say something.
it just struck me because I'm coming to this panel as someone who is here to learn more than anything else. It's not an area of expertise. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to ask the questions of, the teacher, who would be very grateful to be in the training room with either of you. You talked about the systematic development of emotional self-regulation through the language classroom or through the training room. So could I ask the two of you, how do you go about integrating this in a sustainable, systematic way? I mean, there's an assumption there, isn't it, that you
Yeah.
do?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
not, how do you try to make it as impactful as possible?
Anna, do you want to take it first?
Yeah, I don't have much to say here, but I do what I can. So with my trainees on CELTA courses, I focus a lot on making sure, just reminding the trainees that they need to sleep, they need to eat, they need to take breaks, and they need to they need to set up social interactions with their friends and family members. Um, I also try to remind them systematically again and again and again. But of course, these are short courses. Even part-time courses are what, 10 weeks,
Yeah.
6 months maybe
Mm-hmm.
long. Um, to so to take care of themselves. Oh, I've forgotten the other thing. But also what I try to do is when we ask them to do self-evaluation, and I do this with my teachers as well, I encourage them to reflect on how, not just what happens in the classroom and how their teaching's going, but also on their feelings. So how their experiences of the teaching are. Yeah, so I try to focus them more inwards and on themselves so that they can, become aware of what's happening with them so that they can deal with it and then perform better in the classroom.
Yeah. Oh. I think
Sorry,
awareness.
Hedwig, I'm sorry, Anya, but Hedwig, is your hand up? Has it been up for a while now?
Yeah, I'd like to add something to it, but I don't want to just come
Yeah,
in.
go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't
Because it's
notice. I'm
so
sorry. Thanks,
important
Anna,
what
for
you are
pointing that out.
talking about. It's so important, like you keep mentioning inclusion, acceptance. These are all so important when it comes to emotions. It's and Neil, just the situation that you experienced with that student of yours, trainee of yours, who seemed to be bored, and that might have triggered something in you as well. It's such an amazing, like, reflection to us. It's like mirroring what's inside of us. So instead of, like the first thing I would be doing is asking myself, how I feel. What does this situation make me feel like? So what do I feel? What am I feeling at the moment? And I think it's very important to accept what we have, whatever emotion comes up, is to give ourselves permission to feel that, because it is what it is. And so every single time we want to exclude something, we want to suppress something, we want to turn away from something, it just gets bigger. And its emotions can be very uncomfortable. I'm a clinical EFT, emotional freedom techniques practitioner, and I'm I'm very, very much into these things. I help people getting over mental, emotional stuff that they meet in their journey. And so it's very, very important to sit with your emotions. I have never heard of people having to go to therapies because they feel so overjoyed and happy and please help me to get over that. But when it comes to being, I don't know, angry, anxious, whatever, then we need, counseling or therapies or whatever. And I think the biggest key to those things is to sit through those emotions, and as opposed to suppressing it, trying to fix it. And like I loved in your session, Anya, when you said that instead of saying stress management, I don't want to manage my stress, I want to manage my emotions. And you said management emotions. So that's exactly, and it's a learning process. And very, 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 very important, definitely. So, and also there is, when it comes to emotions, very often we make, I think, kind of a mistake where we mistake emotions for behavior. When it comes to anger, anger is an emotion. I need to be able to somehow to learn to manage that by learning myself, who I am. And so angry is just a feeling. But when I break plates and I know kick people and whatever, that's a behavior. That's not anger. So, and those two things are different. And I think knowing the difference between the two is good. So even when we have, I don't know, children or students in our classes who have anger issues, then, giving them space and just making it clear that, look, you can feel your anger. Absolutely, you can. But, kicking others, screaming, whatever, that's a different thing.
That's not,
Helping each other to differentiate between the two and, just.
That's a really important point. Sorry, Neil, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, recognizing the distinction between the two, as much as we don't want to be in a situation where we mistake them, but where we recognize that there is a behavior and it is a behavior, then it does remind us that sitting behind that behavior, there is a raw, authentic emotion. And that can enable us to actually address the problem better. Because rather than labeling the student as, oh, you're bad,
Disruptive, yeah, exactly.
why is this student disruptive?
Yeah.
I mean, I've got to the point now where I think many teachers are empaths. And someone has actually suggested that, well, one of the things you need to deal with, Neil, is that you're taking on their emotions too much. But, it's almost at the point where if something happens in a class that's not right, the very first person I look at is me, not the learner. Because if a learner's bored, I've got to ask the question, well, as the teacher, I need to take responsibility for that. But I think that ability to actually distinguish between the two means that we can take a student who we might think about negatively and learn to be able to think, well, no, this is also someone who deserves compassion, who deserves our help, and who deserves to learn how to regulate the emotion, because that in turn will impact on the behavior.
Yeah. I think when you talk about things like this, it's one thing is being able to recognize the difference between a behavior and an emotion, but another thing is also giving students, even if they are little kids, giving students the right not to share. There's as teachers, we tend to make a lot of assumptions, unfortunately, And for example, the assumption that if somebody is looking out of the window, that means they're bored. If they're looking at their watch, that means they can't wait until the end of the lesson, So that means they're not really interested. And, if they are kicking another student, that means that whatever. So we tend to make a lot of assumptions. So the first thing is, well, how do I know that this is the situation until I have asked? So that's one thing. And the second thing is, if somebody doesn't want to share what's happening with them, respect it. Of course, I want to know because it's important for my work, but it may actually create a better relationship between me and the students or the trainees if I respect their right not to share. Yeah. And that's why it's so important. One of the things that I always say when I conduct training in terms of regulating emotions, I always tell teachers one very, very practical thing. When you do anything, any kind of group work where they're going to talk about emotions, never do it in pairs. Always do it in a group of at least 3, if not 4. Because maybe one of them, maybe even 2 of them will not want to talk about how they feel. And if you do pair work, then they kind of feel forced, or there is no discussion, or there's no sharing, there's no talking because one of them doesn't want to. And they have absolute right not to want to do that, just as we don't always want to talk about our emotions. Yeah. What Hedy said is really important, that, we should be able to kind of sit with our emotions, to experience our emotions. And that we shouldn't suppress our emotions, but it doesn't mean that I can say, for example, listen guys, today I have a really bad day, I don't want to talk about it, but I'm just not I'm not at my best today. And that's it. I signal to people there is a strong emotional turmoil going on in me, and you better not do anything silly, or don't approach me for the next 2 hours or whatever. But I don't want to, I don't necessarily want to talk about the details. So I don't necessarily want to share the whole story.
I
so
do
yeah.
the same.
Can I,
Go
Ania,
ahead,
I
Anna.
interrupted you earlier. I interrupted you. You were about to share how you would how you systematically approach addressing
Okay.
these. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So my context is such that I actually don't do kind of long-term work with people. I do a lot of rather short-term projects. But whenever I can, I do introduce elements of emotional regulation. I do talk to people about, how do you feel today? And I have used the emotion meter, and the one of the reasons for this is, and I know this sounds a bit scary, but if you have a group of people who are all in the blue quadrant, you are not going to achieve your aims today. And so you need to be able to go to plan B. And this is something that I always have, or try to have anyway, plan B, because even if I plod through, even if I really go ahead and do what I was planning to do, it's just not going to have an impact on those people. Now, of course, it doesn't happen very often that everybody is in the blue quadrant, but you may have a lot of people not in a very good place for all sorts of reasons. And you need to know this because it may mean that you have to go to plan B, but it also may mean something very simple, such as, for example, going more slowly, and checking with them more often, giving them more breaks, things like this, like very simple kind of something that you were talking about, Anna, make sure that you take care of your body. Which is extremely important and in a situation like this. I have also started including breathing exercises, and I have also started including mindfulness practice in training. And I'm a huge fan of mindfulness practice, and I actually do it myself every day. And I can see how much influence it has on everything, really on everything. And so, there are people who don't want to do it, which is fair enough. Yeah. There are people who are kind of like, yeah, let's try it. I don't think that's going to change anything, but why don't we try, and then there are people who are really all in, but I think because I know about the benefits of it, it's my responsibility to at least show them that there is this option. Yeah. But of course I can't force them, it's their decision and I have to respect their decision. But yeah, I would feel I'm not doing my duty if I wasn't showing them the options which are out there. So yeah.
Anya, I completely agree, and I do the same. Whenever I can, I introduce the concept of self-reflection in the sense of being aware of what's happening with the teachers in the classroom and just sitting with it and reflecting. Yeah.
I think one of the first moments when I realized that this is something that I really want to explore was years and years ago when I was teaching on a CELTA course, and we had a very difficult situation with one of the trainees. And at that point, it really hit me that I don't even know, how to approach this situation. And this was, I think, the first impulse for me to kind of start exploring, because I really feel that this is something that helps my trainees, helps my students, because learning is such a complicated process and it's such a stressful process at times. And there's so many things happening in your brain and there's so many things happening in your mind that if I believe that it's my responsibility to help students and trainees in the learning process, that is a really, really large part of it.
We've had one question in, and I'm complete loss to know how to answer it.
Okay.
And it's this one about how to recognize at what point a student is on the spiral dynamic model. which I think kind of speaks to something that we were talking about before the webinar started, and that is the role of the teacher in terms of, is the teacher now suddenly a therapist? Is the
Yeah.
teacher expected to understand all of the possible theories that are out there, including some which might be less common and those which are mainstream? So perhaps in thinking about this question, it's not just so much a question of, can we answer a question about spiral dynamics, but how do we, at what point do we need to make a decision about this is beyond our level of experience and expertise? We need additional help here.
Yeah, I think probably Hedy is the best person to answer that. But from my experience, first of all, I have never assumed that learning more about regulating emotions is going to turn me into a therapist. That was never my intention, and I think it would be extremely not only unfair but also dishonest to pretend that I am one and to give people to give people therapy. That is not what I specialize in. The only, I'm a teacher, a trainer who has a maybe slightly better understanding of how you can systematically help students with their emotions, but not in the sense of, reworking their trauma, reworking their really big problems, etc. And one thing that is certainly extremely important for me is to draw the line. So, sometimes people actually do come up with questions, and then I always say, I'm a trainer. I'm not a therapist. I have no qualifications, and so it would be dishonest to, to give you any kind of advice in this. What I can say is that if you feel that you would like to talk to somebody who is a specialist, then there are websites which will give you information about people who can do it. But I am not a therapist. I'm not a therapist. But yeah, it's it seems that it's just one more obligation which is kind of put on teachers' shoulders. I don't think it's one more obligation. I think that's part of the teaching learning process. So for me, it's nothing extra. It's nothing added in the sense of we've already got so many responsibilities of teachers. We don't need this. Well, actually, we need this because it helps them learn. So we do need this, So that's my point of view.
Hedy,
It also helps us, sorry to interrupt, but it also helps us enjoy our work more.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
we teachers really do matter in this process as well.
Yeah.
And we are there for our students, but we deserve good lives as well. And
Oh,
emotional
absolutely.
regulation is really important for this.
Absolutely.